All right, before we get going, anyone got any questions for me? Nothing? Ooh, we do have... For assignment 8, I have 3 CPP files. Can I turn them all in? Is that the assignment we're doing today? I would prefer you combine them into a single CPP file, which shouldn't take too long. If you need help copying lines from one file to another, I can help you with that. Any other questions? Yeah.
It's not like a big deal, but on the lab or like page, you know, where it tells you what needs to input and output. It's like I did it so that the outputs that I made it output match what the assignment says to do. But then on the turn-in page, I think it wants like periods at the end of all the outputs.
Oh, so there's an inconsistency
So
there?
yeah, just to make it consistent, you could probably modify that a little bit. So it's weird.
So I should put periods after these entries here, you're saying?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I can do that. In fact, I'll let you see the sausage making that happens here when instructors do these pages. Look at this. It's a lot of people don't see this. So I'm recording it. So I'll probably get a lawsuit from Blackboard for.
Copyright strike.
All right, there we go. Any other questions? Can we use a string type variable as a variable of the switch statement? Yeah, that's an excellent question. Actually, no. The only types that you can use for a switch statement are either character types or integer types. Let me actually... There we go. Yeah, why is this doing this? And in the case of using why is this?
I started it.
So Yeah, so you could either use an integer or, what's going on here? Why is that not, I've got way too many curly braces going on here. All right. Yeah, so that should work. We can take a look at it. So I've thrown a little interesting thing that we haven't been exposed to yet. Is up till now I've always put using namespace standard, and that what namespace standard is that contains everything that is standardized by C++. That isn't part of the language per se. And when I say part of the language, things like your loops, this int, this char, these are all kind of built into the DNA of the language. There's a whole bunch of other stuff thrown in there that is not part of the core language but has been standardized. For instance, input and output. Cout and cin are all part of the standard namespace. If you do not say using namespace standard, then you have to say std : next to everything that's part of the language standard library, I guess you'd call it. So it's just showing you what you have to do if you do not say using namespace standard, is you have to manually put all that in there. And that's why you put using namespace standard, is it saves you a lot of keystrokes. Yep.
Is there a time when we wouldn't use namespace standard?
Yeah, it's considered generally if you're doing grown-up applications programming, it's considered poor form to bring an entire namespace, the entire standard namespace, into your own namespace. The rationale for having a namespace at all is to prevent naming collisions. So the way it works historically, back in the day, is I'm some company and I'm doing, what am I doing? I don't know, audio. I sell this audio library to my customers, right? And my customers are software developers who need an audio library. And so I've got functions like called the volume function and the treble knob function, and I don't know, whatever the hell audio people are into. It's not my kink. But they buy my library, and they've already got, in their application, they've got 100,000 lines of code already. And they have a treble knob function. Now I have a problem because they can't use my library because they got 100,000 lines of code littered with functions that are named the same thing that my functions are named. And so that's why namespaces came about, is now I, as a vendor, I create some namespace that is like my company name around all my code. And then in order to use the treble knob function, they have to say my company : treble knob, right? And if they could say using namespace my company, and then they have all the collisions, or they don't do that and they just do it selectively as shown here. So that's the rationale for doing it that way instead. The acceptable way, so that I don't have to say std cout everywhere, is if I acknowledge that I don't have something named cout of my own, then I can say using std : cout, and now everywhere in this code I can go ahead and eliminate that. And so I'm selectively bringing in things from the namespace rather than bringing in the entire namespace, which is what the using namespace standard does. But you can get through a large part of this computer science program without sweating it. Instructors, if they have a problem with it, they'll tell you. Otherwise, using namespace standard is the way to go, just for ease. All right, any other questions? Let me check the anonymizer here. Well, I'm using lab 4. It says I'm using an undeclared identifier direction. What that means is it's assuming that you have a variable called direction, but you haven't declared it, meaning you haven't done something like string direction. Now you have a declared identifier. I've declared direction to be an identifier of type string. I'd never say it. It's awkward for me to say it that way. I just say, when I see this error, I'd say, oh, it looks like you have a direction variable. You need to create the direction variable. Here you go, line 3. That's how you create the direction variable. So that's that error. In project 1, why do we have to use the ctime module? I would say, as far as terminology, I would phrase it as, why do we have to include the ctime header file? That'd be the correct way of saying it. We don't even check the time. I mean, we don't even, right. The reason for that is for the, let me actually bring up the description for project 1 real quick. So the reason is for this code here, and specifically it is this right here. So have I in any of the video tips or anywhere explained what the whole SRAND thing is? All right. So here's the deal: is computers can't truly generate random numbers. So the way it works is somewhere in the computer is a list of pseudo-random numbers. And so they are definitely random. Let me go ahead and actually write a little bit of code to do that. I'm going to write the code up here, actually. Random.cpp. So let me see. Let me pull C standard lib. And the function is rand. So we can call, let me say, cout rand. We can see what that function actually produces. Okay, let me come down here. And there is a very random looking number. I can call this function several times. Let me do a YY to yank the line and P for put, like 4 times. So let me go ahead and generate 4 random numbers. Compile this again. Those are definitely random, right? But I can't emphasize enough that this wasn't pulled out of the ether. The computer has this list of them, and it just starts reading off the list. In fact, let me run the program again. I don't quite have them all on the screen here, but if I look at the last 3, those are identical to these last 3. Doesn't matter how many times I run this program. My numbers are quite random, but they're exactly the same random numbers, right? So it'd be like you play a video game and it plays exactly the same way because every random element that it grabs, it uses random numbers to make your experience seem random. It's grabbing from this list, and it's grabbing from the top of the list. So the question is, well, how do we solve this problem? And the way to solve the problem is there's a function called srand. And what srand will do is it does what's called, the S stands for seed. It's seeding